Well, right when I'm ready to opt out of Fear the Walking Dead entirely, this show somehow finds a way to pull me back in. Hey guys, it's Cameron for Fear the Walking Dead, Season 2, Episode 11, Pablo and Jessica, and I really did not know how to feel about this episode, because here's the thing. This season has not been bad. I'm not going to say this season has been terrible. In fact, I'm one of the few people that don't hate this series. There are a lot of people I know that do, and I get it. It's not like The Walking Dead. I appreciate it for that reason. I don't want it to be like The Walking Dead. I want it to be its own thing, and I think it definitely is starting to be its own thing. The problem with this half of the season is that we've had 3 arcs, and only one of them has really been all that interesting. The hotel arc hasn't really worked for me, and especially Chris and Travis last week really dragged things down. However, I have to say that this episode was actually great. I actually really love this episode tonight. I thought both arcs that we focused on were both very interesting. They both actually went somewhere, and more importantly, neither one of them took me out. They both held my interest, and you can really start to see where this is actually going, and I really did like that. Really, I think my only complaint with this episode is that there's no mention of Ophelia, which I still don't understand why they're not mentioning her. But I'm glad we didn't focus on the Chris and Travis of it all, because that's really, I think, the weakest point of these 3 arcs. But let's get into this episode, because I really do want to talk about it. Now, those first 5 minutes we had in this episode of Strand and Madison in this episode honestly might be some of the most intense stuff we've had on the show. And I was highly riveted throughout that entire sequence. They're fighting through these walkers at the bar, and after killing a few, Madison hears Alycia scream. She breaks through a door, leaves Strand behind, and basically this scene gives us a chance to see the stuff that went down with Alycia, but through Madison's perspective, and I thought it was kind of cool the way they did that. And I always love when shows do that, when they show from a different person's perspective. I think they did it pretty well here. And after making it to a safer room behind the bar, Madison calls Strand to join her using a broken liquor bottle. She cuts up a dead walker, tells Strand to cover himself with its insides, and she's actually starting to get it, and I like that. I like that Madison is basically starting to learn this on her own, how walkers work, and doesn't entirely go with their character, I don't know, but it's just refreshing to see these characters actually make a smart decision and actually cover themselves with zombie guts, because that's what you have to do. Again, if you put, I can't say enough, if you put walker blood on you, they think you're dead, and Madison and Strand then slowly walk among the walkers. The two make it to the lobby unharmed and barricade the door behind them, and it's the same door that Alycia finds last week, and I thought that was an incredible way to start things out. I definitely really did like that, and escaping the hotel, Strand and Madison then realize that the truck is gone. Since they can't drive away, they then climb a set of scaffolding to a balcony, and now inside they are alone and safe, and Strand then thinks Alycia has fled to safety, but Madison argues that her daughter would not do such thing, that she wouldn't just go away, and that she would stay close to them. But Strand does have a good point, that Alycia hasn't really been on Madison's side through all of this, and sitting down, she agrees that Alicia's independence is a product of her teaching, and I thought that was a great way to start things out. I absolutely love that, and the show rarely is this intense, I have to say. Like, the show has had, obviously, some highly intense scenes, but this is definitely more of a dialogue-driven type show than a action-driven show, so when we get these awesome action scenes, it's really refreshing. I really like seeing that here, and I think the great thing is it's not the only action scene in this episode. There are actually quite a few more, and I really enjoyed that. So Strand has reappeared, but having taken a shower, Madison has bathed as well, probably the first time they've done that in a very long time, which is honestly kind of interesting to see, because if you think about it, I mean, when you're on the boat and they were on the Abigail, they obviously didn't have much time to shower or, to shower or bathe or just stay hygienic. They weren't able to do that kind of stuff, and just knowing they were able to do that is interesting to see, and I really did like that. They talk about rationing their water, but Strand convinces her to drink. He thinks it's the best thing to do. You know, she wants to save it, but I like these telling her, look, you gotta drink water. You need to have this water. I like this friendship developing between these two. These are two people who, throughout the entire season, has been on opposing sides, and I like that because they're together, they're forced to work together, and they're forced to kind of create this friendship, and I like the way they are starting to bond. I thought it was interesting to see, especially because of all people, Strand and Madison, it felt very strange to go in this direction, but it's actually really working, and I really do like that, and I thought they handled it pretty well here. So Alycia's heard screaming. Madison breaks open the door to let her enter. Strand blocks off the door after Alycia, and other characters enter, and I thought that was really great the way right away, you know, we saw everything that happened from last week. That's how we got there, and so now we're caught up. So now we basically saw everything that went down with Alycia from Madison and Strand's perspective. I really did like that, but we really do actually go somewhere with this. This isn't just one action scene like it was last week. We actually do go somewhere, and I really do appreciate the show for doing that. So I definitely really enjoy that overall. I like that the show actually did go somewhere, and I think that they actually made me like the hotel arc more than I did before. But obviously, one of the things I was most looking forward to in the episode was picking up with Nick's arc, because I've really been loving where that's going, and it goes in some very interesting directions this week. We found out some really good stuff about some of these characters, because over at Colman, that's how you pronounce it, Nick roams a crowded street. He sees a young girl crying, and then explores the infirmary a little further, and going upstairs he finds Alejandro. And Alejandro, we find a lot more out about his character in this episode. Nick apologizes for his mistake at the grocery store, obviously for robbing and everything, and Alejandro tells him that he compromised the entire compound, and while helping Alejandro with medicine, Nick tells a story of his friend from before the infection, and of course it's about Gloria. You know, we remember the story of Gloria and everything, and Nick declares that he wants to make things right, that he knows how to use medicine because he's a junkie and he can actually make himself useful with that. And honestly, that makes perfect sense. That is a direction that I'm actually very happy the show's going in. Nick actually using him being a junkie for good reasons, that's something the show hasn't done before, and that is something that I think is actually very interesting, because up till now, all we've seen is, you know, him being this addiction. His addiction has been this antagonist, and it's been this horrible antagonistic force that it's a horrible thing to do drugs and things like that, and the show hasn't really found any positives about it, but I like that for once we actually did find something kind of positive about it. I thought it was interesting to see, and I really did like that. We see this montage where Nick is pounding away at controlled substances. He creates a pill with the procedure, and he presents it to Alejandro, and the pills will actually give them a shot at a deal. So these two actually seem to be working together. I did like the way that was done, and I like seeing this partnership go down between them. And this episode, I might actually be wrong. Alejandro, I think, we might be able to trust him. Now, is this going to last long? No, but for the time being, it does seem like Alejandro is someone we can trust. Which kind of reminds me of the character of, I'm trying to remember her name, I can't remember her name now, but you remember the character in The Walking Dead, I can't remember her name, but she ran the Alexandria safe zone. I can't think of her name right now, but I didn't trust her, and then I realized that we could trust her, so I feel like it's a situation with that, and I definitely did like that. So back at the hotel, Madison and Strand actually do discuss going after Ophelia. They don't know where she's gone. Madison says that they should track her down, but Strand says no. Obviously, if she left on her own. And Elena then explains that there are plenty of resources in the shops surrounding the hotel, but that the inhabitants want her dead, and that they don't want her there. You know, they want to do whatever they can to make sure that she's dead. She's one of the only people left standing. She was just, I believe, a receptionist working there, and, she basically is kind of in the same situation there. And so I do like seeing Elena and Madison, Strand, and Alycia team up. I thought it was interesting to watch here. I didn't really know if we could trust her, but outside, Madison and Strand call up to a room looking for Oscar. Oscar calls down a balcony, allows them to come up. They need each other to survive, and he understands that. And again, I like that this isn't actually complicating things. They're actually thinking, let's try to make this work. Obviously this is a tough situation for both of us. We're both in a very, shitty situation right now. We're both going through something. Let's actually try to join forces, and let's not go against each other. So for once, they're actually benefiting from this, and I like seeing that. Something very rare we see on the show, and I like that we saw that here. So Nick is still helping Alejandro with their pill production. Nick is still curious and asks about Alejandro's bites, because obviously he has this bite, but yet he says that he's not infected, and we need to understand why, it didn't really make sense how he had this bite, but he wasn't turning into a walker. And he reveals that he knows about the bite, and he shows his doubt about the story, and Alejandro asks Nick to take a leap of faith in believing in him, but Nick admits he really does have trouble with that, because he knows what that bite indicates. And again, that part of Alejandro, I don't really know if we can trust all the way. I mean, the fact that he is kind of in denial that he thinks he's going to get better, at this point, I feel like he actually does think that. I feel like he's kind of in denial, that maybe he has this belief that maybe things are going to get better. Maybe he thinks that he's not going to turn into a walker, but I feel like that is just inevitably what's going to happen. But we'll have to see, because again, he has this belief that's not going to happen. So I don't know. I mean, it's again something neither show has really covered, and it's just something that I like that Nick isn't really latching onto right now, because it completely clouds everything he's seen before. For about a year or so now, I think it's been a year since the apocalypse has happened, he has seen tons of walkers and people getting infected, and ever since he saw Gloria, and now seeing this, I don't think is going, and if, let me say this, if Alejandro does in fact turn into a walker, I think that's the thing that is going to give Nick hope, and I think he wants to have that hope, but with something like this, it's kind of just hard to believe in something that just sounds so outlandish, and I don't really know where that's going, but I think that definitely is very interesting. So in Oscar's room, Madison asks him about his plan. She sees the opportunity in the hotel as a home. She feels that obviously they are trapped there, they should try to live together, and Oscar doesn't think that it's worth it. He feels that this is a place that walkers are just going to invade, and he's not wrong, obviously. The walkers want the hotel, and Oscar comes around to agreeing with Madison, but says he will only help if Elena leaves. He wants nothing to do with her, because she witnessed it, and I think it's for two reasons. One, she was a victim at the wedding. Two, I think he's worried that she was bit, and Oscar and his friends lost their loved ones because of Elena, and that's really what it is. He feels that it's Elena's fault that this all happened. He doesn't understand that there were walkers and things like that, and Madison promises they can all start over. She claims others will find the hotel, and that the two groups actually could hold it together, and Oscar agrees and tells them to take the keys. So it seems like they are working together. They actually are going somewhere with this, and I kind of like the way this is kind of like an Alexandria safe zone before we had an Alexandria safe zone. The hotel is a place to help out people, to live until they can't live there anymore, and I think this is definitely going to be interesting to see how that all goes down. So Madison and Strand leave, but they know that Oscar's mother-in-law, she is still really doubting their situation. She just feels that this place has failed, and that there was too much that happened here, and that it's just not really going to work out. And Strand admits to missing his home with Thomas, and I'm glad that we brought this up, because we haven't talked about it since it happened, so I'm glad that they talked about this again. He agrees to help with the hotel, but says it's actually not his home. It's not, he can't really help with it, but it's their home for right now. So I thought that was definitely interesting. So holding his pill next to an Oxycontin, Nick knows that he has succeeded. He will take the fake pills to sell to the store. And before leaving, Alejandro tells Nick a story of a young addict who got mixed in with walkers. And Alejandro says that he rushed in to help and says that he was bitten. He says Luciana saved him and he never turned from the bite. So that's interesting. It seems like Luciana is this savior, and that Luciana seems to be the person to save everyone. Now, how Luciana can do this, I don't really know, but Nick then moves the man's shirt to check the mark, and it's definitely there. So he's not wrong. People are getting bitten, and nothing seems to be happening to them. Now, how this is happening, if this is just a belief thing, or if it's just taking them longer, again, we don't really know, but that storyline is just really interesting. So Alejandro knows that Nick likes being out of the danger, but he wants him to be careful, and he claims that he wants Nick to come back, but Nick appreciates the belief in him, and as they look over, Luciana's playing soccer with some children. Nick goes over to join them, and Alejandro watches. Basically, I think Alejandro sees a lot of himself in Nick. Nick is someone who, obviously, he's going through a rough time. He thinks there's a place for him to start over, and he really wants to help him, and Nick clearly knows what he's doing. He scores a goal right away, and I don't think we've seen this before, but Nick apparently is really good at soccer, and Luciana shares a very flirtatious smile with him, and they go in this really interesting direction with Luciana and Nick, because it seemed like those two were going to be kind of just like opposing partners, but it seems like in this episode, Luciana might actually be Nick's love interest, and I'm honestly all for it. I think it's something that Nick needs, especially since Gloria, he's kind of been tentative to date anyone, and I think Luciana's gonna be the person that might actually save him from that. We'll get into that, though. So a man then covered in blood approaches. Luciana calls him Echo. He says he found Pablo, but that he was in pieces, and Luciana tries to walk the conversation, but is at a distance. She goes over to investigate as the children surround Nick, and after the break, now we don't know who Pablo is, but Nick and Luciana are walking away from La Colonia, and he tells her she didn't have to come, but she says that he doesn't know Spanish, and Luciana reveals that Pablo wasn't her boyfriend, which Nick thought. It's actually her brother, and she goes on to talk about their story. And we find out that after the infection, her father was gone before it started, and their mother had somehow lost contact. And Nick embraced Luciana, apologizes, they share another moment, and again, that's very interesting we found, that her family was separated, very much like what's going on with Nick. So Nick and Luciana are a lot more familiar and actually share a lot more similarities than I think we thought they do. You know, Luciana also has lost her entire family, and she clearly has come there to start over. So it really is seeming like things at La Colonia actually are a lot more hopeful for Nick than we might have thought, and I do like seeing that. I think it's interesting to watch, and it's good to see hope, you know, some sort of hope and not just hopelessness, which is all we've gotten from Nick's character thus far this season, which I'm glad we're seeing. So one of Oscar's people is with Alycia and Strand clearing out the hotel rooms. They open the door and begin, and outside the others are starting fires with all the bodies, and Alycia acknowledges that these people have taken her mother's lead. They finished one floor from the 3 hotels, but Madison notes that it's necessary, that they need to, you know, have as many rooms as possible, that way they can keep the walkers out. And as they look over the ocean, Madison apologized for her lack of raising Alycia. Very interesting scene. We've always known that these two have always been kind of at odds since the shows begin. They've always been clashing, and Alycia assures her mother that she didn't do anything wrong, and this is the kind of stuff I want the show to do. I actually want some good character development, and I like that they did that here. You know, I'll take great character development over action scenes any day. I mean, as long as the scene's going somewhere. And this actually is. Alycia then walks in the water. She's examining the underside of the bridge as her mother calls. Alycia states they don't have to put down the walkers and points to the riptide notice on the bridge. They've realized they can use these tools to their advantage, actually. This might be a way to get out the walkers. You know, they don't have to kill them necessarily. They just need a way to get them out. And it's a very interesting way that this goes, but again, it's something that The Walking Dead hasn't really done, and I really do like the way the fear is taking advantage, and again, just doing things that Walking Dead hasn't done before, because if it did all the same things, it would just feel like the same show, but it needs to do what it can to make it seem like its own thing, and I think they did a really good job with that, with things like this episode, which really, like I said, did things that we didn't expect it to do, and I really did appreciate that. So back at La Colonia, Alejandro notes that Nick was respectful to the gang, and Nick admits that he was more friendly than he wanted to be. They both note surviving sucks, and Alejandro rewards Nick's hard work with giving him his own house, we find out. And Nick claims that he doesn't really need it. He feels that he's just fine where he is, and that, you know, doing that is just too much, but Alejandro insists that he has helped the community more than he realizes. So Nick's kind of becoming like a godlike figure, which is interesting to see, and I like that Nick is less of a rebel and actually is helping them, and I thought it was interesting, and definitely, again, weird direction, but I really think it's working. So at the hotel, Madison is just outlining a plan for the pier trip, and after being told she would be in the boat, Alycia insists that she would be better on the pier, and Alycia starts to cry. She tells Madison about the walker she thought was her mother. You know, she, of course, thought that Madison was turned, and Madison says that they will never lose each other, which, that honestly, I think is definitely going to be a very crucial line for the rest of the show, because eventually, I mean, one of them, something's going to happen. I think something's going to happen to one of them. Alicia's someone that I'm very worried about for this season, I have to say. I don't think Alicia's in... I definitely think Alicia's in danger, and I think they should definitely be worried about Alycia. But Alycia leaves for her position, and outside the group is making noise at the walkers. Using her phone, Alycia plays music to draw them out, which is interesting. I don't think it's something we've touched upon, but apparently music drowns out the walkers. Strand is inside with Elena, releasing all the walkers from their rooms. Now, I think some people might have thought this is lame. I actually found it really interesting. I thought this was actually a really well done scene. Madison's doing the same in the lobby with pots and pans. They all lead this large group of the dead toward the back of the hotel, and Alycia and Hector are late, and they worry about the others, because They're worried, obviously, that some bad could happen to them, and the entire group leads the walkers out onto the pier. Madison remains the closest to the herd. One of Oscar's friends locks the back door behind them. Alycia and Hector run down to the beach, and they retrieve an escape boat. Oscar's mother-in-law watched from a balcony, and the boat's unfortunately having trouble getting out. They don't know if they'll be able to do this. The water's too shallow. As the walkers near the end of the pier, the boat finally gets going. Many survivors have joined Oscar on the balcony, overlooking the action, realizing that maybe they can actually drown these walkers. Maybe they can actually do something with this hotel. And it honestly is kind of a hopeful thing. Again, in a show that hasn't really given us much hope, I like that we are actually going in a hopeful direction. So after Alycia calls her, Madison drops her pans, jumps in the water. She swims to the boat. The walkers all begin to follow into the water, and basically we see that they're somehow able to drown out the walkers, which is really interesting. And again, it's a little bit strange, but it just kind of makes sense, and because of the way this episode was going, it didn't feel out of place. If this was an episode like episode 10, where not much was going, episode 9, where not much was going on, it was just people talking in a hotel, I wished we would have spent more time on something like this. This is a lot more interesting. I do think this is interesting where this is going. Again, it's not really something that I think Rick and the survivors have really touched upon, because they're in a much different situation than that of everyone in the Fear crew is, which is interesting to see. So basically, Nick is alone in his house when there's a knock at the door, and after he responds, there's no answer. He gets up. Luciana's at the door. She claims that she's too tired to sleep. He lets her in. She discovers that Nick is actually learning Spanish, and he practices with her because he's one of the only people that isn't fluent in Spanish. And they both sit on the bed, talk about Nick's self-conscious image, and Nick reveals that he has a sister, and that is a surprise to Luciana. She says it's hard to imagine him with a family, and because she's so used to him being on his own and being a loner. That's how she found him, and so far that's just kind of the vibe he's given off. And Nick says that he thinks that she and his mother are still alive, and they kind of are coming to the assumption that Nick is dead, but I like that he's actually thinking that they're alive, and tells her that his father died before the infection. And what I love about this is that I talked about, I think this all goes back to those flashbacks in episode 8, where we saw Nick with Gloria. That was someone he could talk to. And finally, with Luciana, he has someone to talk to about this. He has someone to vent to. He has someone in a familiar situation. And he has someone that he can trust. And he knows that will actually help him and is not just there to give him drugs, which is very interesting to see. And I'm actually very happy of this direction they're taking him and Luciana. I really do like this. So the camera pans across an enormous banquet table filled with food. Many of the hotel survivors are about to feast, but Oscar isn't present, and his brother says that he isn't ready for it. Strand asks for the number of the honeymoon suite and says that he will return. Oscar's waiting outside of the suite. When Strand gets there, he asks Oscar if she is in there, and the man explains the story of how he met his wife. Strand tells him that he relates, and Oscar knows Strand is here to kill his wife, and he claims he won't let him. They both acknowledge that the situation isn't fair for anyone involved. He tells him that it's not his wife anymore, because of course she is a walker, and that she's going to be turned. He knows that she's going to be turned, and Strand wants to kill her. And I like the way that Oscar and Strand really related here, because Strand just had to put someone down that he loves, and now Oscar's going to have to do the same, and he really doesn't want to have to do that. And he tells him that death parted them, their vows are relieved, and Strand says that he won't know what to do with himself, but he will become another person. Both men say that they liked who they were with their partners, and Strand asks to help him, and Oscar says that her name is Jessica. Finally, we figured out who Jessica was. I'm like, who the fuck is Jessica? But finally we know, and Strand then asks to help Jessica. Very well done scene. Music then plays. Luciana wakes up in Nick's bed. He's on the floor and says she stay and sleep. She said no, that people would look down at it, and as she's about to leave, Nick asks if she's testing him, and without answering, she walks up, kisses him right there. They begin to kiss more aggressively, move off screen. I'm assuming they had sex, most likely. And in the hotel, Oscar rises, lets Strand into the room with Jessica, basically realizing that he needs to kill her. And as he enters, you can hear her noises. The door closes behind Strand. The episode ends with Strand putting her down. Very somber ending, but again, a very hopeful ending, with basically Strand and Madison now giving the hotel newfound hope, and that is the way the episode ends. So, for me, this was a really great episode. I really loved the way this episode was done. I thought both plots are very interesting. And yeah, not a ton happened, but we really are starting to get things moving. And I think a lot of these characters are really starting to see the direction they're going in. And I like that things are a lot more hopeful, that there actually is hope in the town. What's going on with the hotel, the way that Strand and Madison are trying to tell everyone you can move forward, and that, yes, your loved ones obviously are walkers, but sometimes you gotta put them down. They're starting to get it, and I like seeing that. I like that they actually are starting to understand that there are things that you have to do that you don't want to do, but in this world you just have to do, such as putting down your loved ones, and that's something that obviously Oscar didn't want to do, but it's also something that Strandon wants to do, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of these two bond. I think there's going to be a lot of bonding between them, and I'm hoping to see more of that. I also like the friendship that Strand and Madison are creating. I think that's very interesting to see, and I like Madison and Alycia finally actually kind of making amends and apologizing to each other and actually acting like mother and daughter. They're forced to act like mother and daughter here. They haven't had a lot of time, but now that they're on their own, they're forced to, and I really loved seeing that. My biggest question is how long is this hotel going to work out? Because I can't think this is going to work out longer than the rest of the season. I think by the end of the season, the hotel is probably going to be destroyed. But we'll have to see. I don't really know what's going to happen there. I am thinking that the season's going to end with everyone ending up at you know, where Nick is, at La Colonia, because that seems like that is a safe haven right now. That is a place where people get bitten, and Luciana somehow saves them. Luciana seems to be the savior, and I like the way that Nick and Luciana, like I said, are very similar, that they are starting to bond. It's something that I didn't really expect to happen, but I really do love the direction that that's going into. But again, how long is Nick going to stay? You know, is Nick finally... I think he's starting to feel content. I think he's really starting to move on from what happened to him, and I think Luciana really is going to be the one to save him. And I really do love that direction. I think that's very interesting. As far as the whole someone being bitten and not getting turned, is this, you know, a temporary thing, or can they just not be turned? Because I can't help but think that maybe this is just temporary, that maybe it just is a prolonged thing where Luciana somehow delayed it. I feel like that's what it is. I feel like that's what's going on here, that the person that they can in fact be turned, but they're just prolonging the transformation. But that's personally what I think is going on there. Overall, guys, for me, one of the best episodes of Fear the Walking Dead we've had so far. I really love this episode overall. I'm glad we did not see Chris and Travis. I think they are the lowest point of this show right now. They are by far the two worst characters we've had, and the characters we're focusing on right now, that is what I want to see. Still no real update on Ophelia. I'm sure we'll find out what happened to her at some point, but I do like that they're at least mentioning her. I like that they aren't just forgetting things. This is what I want the show to be. I hope the show stays this consistent. I'm worried that it's not going to. I think we're going back to Chris and Travis next week, which I really hope we don't, but I think we are. But that's in my review. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys thought of this episode overall. For me, like I said, this is the episode that showed me that this season they are really trying to improve things, and I really did like that. But that's in my review. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you guys in my next video, which will be for the season premiere of Narcos. I know you guys have been waiting for it. Well, that will be an next review, I promise, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.